The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Elena Kemp from the Division of Professions and Occupations. We are just about to start the stakeholder meeting, but before we start, I just want to make sure that everybody is able to hear us okay. And the way we can tell is if you would just please raise your hand. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, just one moment. Okay, welcome and thank you for attending the State Board of Nursing stakeholder meeting via webinar today. Before we get started, we would like to introduce the staff members from the Division of Professions and Occupations that are present. My name is Elena Kemp. I'm a regulatory coordinator, and also here attending with me is Roberta Hills, the interim program director, and Laura Bravo. She's a policy analyst, and we'll be facilitating this meeting today. Okay, so in compliance with the governor's order regarding COVID-19, the division has transitioned to a platform that is 100% virtual, and we appreciate your flexibility. As many of you have been to DORA stakeholder meetings before, we would like to reiterate the importance of your comments today. DORA makes decisions every day that may affect your life and your business, so your input is vital in the rulemaking process. Throughout this process, our goal is to create regulations that clarify and explain legislation, ensure minimum competency to enter and continue practice, and provide only what is absolutely necessary for consumer protection without creating unnecessary barriers to the marketplace. Your input will be part of the information that goes to the board as it considers permanently adopting the emergency licensing rules related to COVID-19. More specifically, we'll be talking about Rule 1.26, the temporary licensure of registered nurses, advanced practice nurses, and certified nurse assistants, and temporary suspension of certain nurse and nurse aid education requirements pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order D 2020-038. This meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on the website at a later date. And many of you have actually, well, let me start by saying that this meeting is being held solely by webinar. So please raise your hand by using the hand icon if you would like to speak, and we can unmute your line so you'll be heard by everyone. Or you can type in your comments in the comment section and we'll just read it aloud. Before we start taking comments, I want to ask that everybody providing comments, please state your name and who you represent, if any. Feel free to provide either general comments on the rule changes or specific comments on the proposed language. Please try to keep your comments limited to 3 to 5 minutes or less. And try not to repeat something that was already said. Stating you're in full agreement with someone else works just fine, and we'll go ahead and note that. And just as a reminder, if you are using your audio through your computer, please remember to put any phones on vibrate or turn them off. And whether you're using computer audio or phone audio, try to keep background noises to a minimum when speaking. At this time, we are ready to take public comments. So please raise your hands if you would like to speak.
Okay, I see that. I'm just going to go basis whoever I see first. See if I see anybody who wants to speak. I see Mary Ann Osborne who's raised her hand. I'm going to unmute you, Mary Ann, so please go ahead and introduce yourself and who you represent, if anyone. And then if you have a general comment, that's great. If it's a specific comment, please reference the rule number if possible. Mary Ann, you are unmuted.
Hi, thank you. I'm Marianne Osborne. I'm a practitioner in the Colorado Springs area, and I've overall had a good experience with telehealth. I'm grateful that it's available. And I just wanted to comment that many of my clients have been also grateful to have it. I have people who want to come back in the office, but I do have people that travel a distance. around the area, and so they like the option. I also believe that we need to maintain an option in case we, the numbers don't continue to go in the right direction. Then we're we're ready, we're prepared to do this again if needed. So that's basically. Thank you. Appreciate all your hard work.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to look for another spoken comment right now, and then we'll switch over to some written comments. Let me see if I see anyone. Again, you can raise your hand, and I will unmute you if you would like to speak for everyone to hear you. I'm not seeing any more raised hands, so I'm going to flip over to some written comments, and I'll read those aloud. Let's see. I have a few people who have introduced themselves, and appreciate that. All the attendees are noted. I see there's a question regarding, can we get a copy of this document with all of the links? Elena, could you address that, please?
Yes. So the document that's currently showing on the screen is just the draft rules that were actually adopted during the emergency rulemaking hearing. So everybody should have received a copy of this exact document with the notice. It should have been, I want to say, the third page of the notice. The notice is generally 2 pages. So if you flip through, you'll see the same exact copy. But if you don't have that copy for whatever reason, please reach out to our email. And that is the email address that you want to go to is Dora_DPO_rulemaking@state.co.us. So if you reach out to that email address, we will definitely provide another copy of these rules. And I believe they're actually on the board's website as well.
Okay, thank you, Elena. So we have a question from an Amber Lockwood asking about, are we able to use our temporary license in a compact state? This forum today is related to taking input regarding the temporary rules. I'm not sure, Roberta, if you have any information or if regarding this question, or if it's something they should contact the nursing board directly or the compact directly to ask about this temporary license used in a compact state.
This is Roberta Hills. It's my understanding it's only for single state. It's not a compact temporary license.
Okay, great. Thank you, Roberta. Hopefully that answers your question, Amber, but if not, please let us know. All right, I'm going to switch back over to see if anyone has raised their hand that I can find. All right, so Colleen Casper, I see you've raised your hand. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. You're unmuted, Colleen Casper.
Thank you. So I just put a couple questions. I'm sorry, am I echoing?
Oh, you're good.
Okay. In the chat box, and I'm sorry I came on a little bit late. Did you give any background as to how we came to the discussion about establishing the emergency orders as permanent rules?
Elena, would you be able to address that question?
Yes. So through Executive Order D 2020-038, Governor Polis mandated that we change the licensing rules to allow for more healthcare professionals to enter the workforce. So we had a team of people here at DORA that drafted these rules to meet those requirements of that order. And then it was presented in front of the board. I forget which date, and Roberta, you can answer that part. But earlier this month in June, the board decided that they did want to go through with permanent rulemaking. So now we've just opened the discussion up for stakeholders to chime in and to see if this is something that you want to make permanent, or do you think that these rules should expire after the 120 days that they would that they're supposed to expire. I believe these rules will expire at the end of August if permanent rulemaking is not the way that we go with these.
That's
Does that
very
answer your
helpful.
question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Colleen, did you have any other questions or comments?
I have a
Colleen?
couple. I do have a few more. Do you want me to go or give someone else a turn?
Yep. No, we have plenty of time here, so feel free to go ahead and ask a couple of your questions. I see them in chat, but I'll go ahead and just let you speak yourself if you don't mind.
Awesome, thanks. So I was wondering if we have a count of temporary license applications as well as the number that have been issued to RNs and APRNs in this executive order window.
I don't think we have that offhand. I'm not sure, Roberta, if that's something we would be able to track down or if that's something we can disclose. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts, or we could do some research. Roberta?
I think we can get it from licensing, but I don't know that we can have it for this meeting. I think we could possibly post it. Are you able to post answers to questions that are that specific? Elena?
Yeah, Elena, I'm not sure how.
Sorry, this is Elena. So what I would suggest to obtain that type of information is I would actually reach out to Lee Razor, who is our public information officer for the division. And basically what you want to do is a core request for public documents.
Okay.
And that'll allow the division to compile all that information and then send it to you. So that would, because during this meeting it's not really feasible, but
Right.
you definitely can get that information by reaching out to Lee Razor.
My question really has to do with what is the demand? I mean, is there a demonstrated need to make temporary licensure permanent in the state of Colorado? So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that.
I see.
But I'll take your advice and see what I want to do with it next. My other question has to do with both the APRN and the RN, and I'm not as positive about the LPN and CNA. Speak to about the unavailability of certification exams as being the rationale for extending temporary. So my question then is, do we need to address what happens if a temporary licensee fails their Nclex and or national certification exam? What do we need to address that in some kind of rules?
Roberta?
Okay.
Is that something that you can speak to?
This is Roberta Hills. If you're making a suggestion that it would be changed, that is, you would say if someone was issued a temporary license and they do not pass the Nclex, we would fall back on our normal process, which is they lose their license. Not that they lose it. They will not have their temporary, and they will not have their full status. Now, they have 3 chances and 3 years. So if we extend the temporary, then they would actually be able to probably retain the temporary until they would still have that until they pass. And once they pass, they get the regular. They've kind of confused things, but the temporary is good until December 31st. If they're testing and they don't pass, they keep the temporary. If January 1, we have not extended that, they no longer have a temporary, but they still have the right to continue testing. Does that make sense?
Laura, can you check and see if we've lost the lady that was just speaking?
Colleen, Casper.
Okay, let me see. It looks like we have some connectivity issues. She's currently offline. So we will go back to Miss Casper. Laura, are you still available?
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to unmute the next person. I see Christine Pateros, but I think she might be, it's not letting me, oh, here we go. Christine, are you there?
I am here. Yes, this is Christine. Hello.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you for your time. I'd like to convey that I am in support as an RN myself with a previous inactive license and now the temporary emergency license for that to be enacted as permanent. Am I understanding correctly that that's part of what is being considered?
Yes.
So I'm in support of that, and I just wanted to convey that to anyone else on the line that would like to support it, if they could simply chime in there, and I'd like to know what the timing will be to this decision and what will go into the decision. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Christine. Elena, could you address the timing?
Yes, and I was actually going to do that next, but we can jump ahead. So the next steps, the board will meet tentatively on August 19th, and that's when they'll consider making these rules permanent. In between time, we'll just be collecting all of the stakeholder written comments. The board will actually see the webinar recording from today's meeting, so they'll be able to get a good feel of how the public stakeholders are feeling about these temporary rules and should we move forward, and then they'll make that decision on August 19th.
Okay, thank you, Elena.
Public safety. It's all for public protection. So when the board looks at it, they'll look at it in terms of public protection.
Okay, thank you, Roberta. All right, I'm going to move on to the next attendee that has their hand raised. I see Diane Lusty. I've unmuted you, Diana.
Hi, thanks. I'm Diana Lusty. I'm a graduate student at the University of Denver, studying health policy and military leadership. I have a question. I have two questions. One is in regards to Rule 1.2 for A and B. To the
Could you repeat that, sorry?
Sure. So I have two questions. One is in regards to Rule 1.2E 15C for A and B, and that's in regards to the temporary suspension of clinical hours. What is being decided for permanent adoption in that?
You're talking
Elena,
about
could you
education hours?
Yeah, so because it's currently temporarily suspended and it's being considered for permanent adoption, what would be decided for permanent adoption right now?
We're taking input. So if you have suggestions, you're welcome to give suggestions. It can range from we'll just extend these for 3 months, or we'll extend it another year, or we'll reduce the hours, or we'll raise the hours. I mean, so anything can happen. But the board, when they vote on it or when it's put forth, there could be conditions put on any of these items. So, but if you have recommendations, they would love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. So we have actually talked to a number of individuals impacted by the issue, and I think there were discussions on potentially adopting a virtual simulation. I think that there are individuals that are pretty much moving forward with that. But there is also some dilemmas in regard to reducing clinical hours and the potential that it would impact that it would have on the public. But also understand that whatever is being adopted here will likely also influence whatever is adopted, the emergency licenses. So my second question is, will permanent rulemaking apply to emergency licenses also?
I'm sorry, this is Elena. I'm having a hard time hearing you. It sounds like you're going in and out, so I'm unable to follow what specific rule you're referring to, but also I couldn't hear that last question. Could you repeat that?
Sure. So will permanent rulemaking also apply to emergency licenses?
Are you referring to the temporary licenses, the rules on the temporary licenses that's on the screen?
No, I'm referring to the emergency licensing that was issued by DPO, more specifically for expired licenses. Are those rules, is what is being adopted with the licenses? Can that also be adapted to nurses with emergency licenses?
I see. Roberta, do you have information about that, or are you able to answer the question a little bit better?
I can't understand the question, to be honest, because of the it keeps breaking up.
Would it be better?
I wonder if she could type it out. Could you type it out?
Yes.
Okay. While she's doing a written comment, I don't know if you want to move to the next person that's her hand raised, or did you want to wait, Lauren?
Yes, her question is, can these rules, will permanent rules also be effective for emergency licenses? So I guess the board might offer emergency licenses, which are different than temporary licenses, from what I'm gathering. Is that something you can speak to, Roberta?
Well, I think unless I am not understanding what she's asking, I think they're one and the same. I think it started out as, we called it like the licensing for these emergency, as a part of these emergency rules, and when they were actually issued, they're called temporary. I saw one, I think it's temporary emergency, so I think it's one and the same. So the board will be addressing what they want to do with that. Do they want to extend it? Do they want to extend it for a year? Do they want to make it end on December 31st? So that's what the actual rulemaking will determine. If she has a recommendation, like if she thinks it should be extended, then she should say that.
She's clarified in the chat that she's referring to emergency licenses are for expired licensed nurses, the active emergency status. I'm not sure, maybe you're not familiar with those. If you're not, either way, it sounds like the question is related to are the temporary rules, emergency rules affecting those, but it sounds like the temporary rules that are being considered right now are related to temporary licenses, which would be different than a license for an expired licensed nurse reactivating in an emergency. Is that correct?
Well, I think our expired licensees were able to do reinstatement applications. And in doing that, they were given these temporary licenses.
Okay, got it. All right, let me go back and see. All right, so Diana, hopefully that addressed your question. Your question, though, will be provided to the board for their consideration. So if they have further thoughts about expired licensed nurses, they can take that under consideration. If you have a specific recommendation, you can let us know. Again, your audio is going in and out, so we're going to recommend you use the chat feature. But thank you for your comment. I'm going to go to some written comments. I believe regarding the last speaker, I got a few comments saying that they agree. I got a comment from Carrie Stevenson saying I'm supportive of it as well, and Jody Hammerl saying she was in support of it as well. Just want to do those quickly. And then I'm going to jump back to the top and start taking things in order in the written comments. So I have some people who have introduced themselves in the chat. Unless I see an actual question or comment, I'm going to skip those. We do have you recorded as attending. And so we had a question from Kathleen McKinnis of, do the proposed adoption of rules include the non-traditional refresher students? Roberta, is that something you can help address?
Well, the non-traditional refresher student is someone who is required to get clinical hours. And if they are a graduate, I would, they fall into the category of a graduate. And so we had, I think they can get those temporary licenses.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. Kathleen, let us know if you have further follow-up on your inquiry. All right, the next question from Diane Powell. Can you address Pearson Vue testing issues and any future plans? Can we do a combination of in-house and virtual skills for CNA? Roberta, do you have any comments or questions or response regarding Pearson Vue and testing for CNAs, or is that something the board is still considering?
The board is still working on figuring that out, but they are pretty active in trying to, they're moving towards having an electronic test rather than the manual, paper, pencil. And they're working on the guidelines for the skills exam. So it's all still being worked on.
Okay, thank you, Roberta. Diane, if that does not address your question, or if you have further recommendations for the board to consider in that area, please let us know. All right, so looks like Jennifer Vandermeer has a question regarding Rule 1.2.E, point 15, point C, and then 4C. If you need me to repeat that, Elena, please let me know.
Yes.
It's requiring the minimum of 50. Okay.
Is it 1.2 or is it 1.26? Because that's the only rule
it's
that
written,
we're discussing.
It says requiring a minimum of 50% of clinical hours. Do you know which rule that is related to?
Simulation, yes. Right now that is waived. And so okay. That'll be considered in the emergency rule. So right now that means it can be 75%, it can be 100%, but the emergency rule making will consider what to do with that next.
Okay,
so
great.
if you have a recommendation, Jennifer, you should put forward your ideas.
Right. Jennifer had a question regarding that, and I think she's clarified, so Jennifer, if you have any recommendation, you had a question regarding would these adoption of these rules make that permanent? But if that's what the board is looking into right now. So if you have a comment or a recommendation regarding whether, there's a percentage that should be allowed or not allowed, please go ahead and send that in. All right. The next comment question is from Marianne Sherman. My name is Marianne Sherman from All for Kids Home Health. My question is regarding CNA and home health. For CNAs who need to work off a temporary license, since nurses supervise but not in the home on a daily visit, does this meet the supervision requirement, or will this limit CNAs with temporary licenses to only be allowed to work in hospitals or facilities? Roberta, I don't know if you have any comments on that, or if that's something that is not able to be addressed in these temporary rules. Let me know if you need me to repeat that.
Well, I think the definition of supervision has been, it's spelled out in the Med-Aid rules, and it's a telephone call away. So a lot depends on how well that facility has actually trained their CNAs, and they would have to set up a reasonable supervision.
Okay, thank you, Roberta. Marianne, please let us know if you have follow-up on your question or comment. Another inquiry from Jennifer Vandermeer. She was curious if this is only for registered nurses or for both registered nurses and practical nurses. So who do these temporary rules apply to, I believe is the question.
Well, as you look at it, it's the temporary rules that are here are for RNs, LPNs, and CNAs, and then the education programs. And then we had some expanded practice rules, and that had to do with advanced practice nurses and telehealth.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
We do have
Yes,
Elena. We have a couple of people with their hand raised, and I just don't want to lose those people.
Okay. Sure.
Who want to speak.
Okay, I will skip over to them. Let me find one. Courtney Fox, looks like your hand is raised. Courtney, can you hear us? Can you speak?
Yep, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for taking my question. So my name is Courtney Fox. I'm a registered nurse who had a previously expired license, and I temporarily reinstated in March due to the emergency orders. So my active/emergency status license is set to expire on June 30th. And so I guess I'm wondering, and I know that there's been a couple of questions on this topic, but I still haven't gotten the clarity that I needed about if the board in August is actually going to be looking at permanently reducing the steps or eliminating some of the steps for expired RNs to re-enter the workforce, namely the RN refresher courses that under the regular rules are required. I think there was a speaker, Christine, that kind of had the same question about that. And then the woman that was going in and out, Diana, I think was trying to ask that as well. So if I could just get some clarity on if in fact those rules are going to be considered for being permanently changed in August, and where do we submit feedback and ideas for those, that would be great. Thank you.
Ms. Fox, this is Elena. I just wanted to make sure that the portion that of your question is in the draft rules that's showing on the screen, and because these are the only rules that the board is actually going to consider for permanent adoption. So I just want to make sure that we're not like going off in the woods with the conversation regarding other rules that's in the Nursing Practice Act that potentially might not even be discussed in the August meeting.
This is Roberta Hills, and I agree with Elena on that. And I guess I kind of misunderstood a little bit, but I think the people that are trying to reinstate, the reason that the board requires the refresher course is to demonstrate competency. So if you actually went out and worked with an emergency license, you can provide that evidence to the board and see if they will accept it for your reinstatement.
Okay, so go ahead.
So it sounds like those temporarily relaxed requirements for previously expired RNs will not be considered for permanent change. Is that correct? I just need to get some clarity on it.
I think Elena is right. That first order that came out that tried to increase the workforce, I think that's where you guys got your emergency license, and it expires in June.
Correct.
And that's That's not really in these rules. But it doesn't mean that you can't. If you went out and worked and you can provide evidence of it, the reason you were asked to do the refresher was to prove that you had current competency. So if you can prove that by what you did during the emergency, the board, that might work for you to get that your license reinstated.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Just to, just to clarify, because there were several executive orders that were issued in March and thereafter. The governor has continuously continued to extend the executive orders. And so I think that there are a lot of questions around, it seems like it's a common theme, especially with these rules. Are these going to be extended, and what's going to happen next, like next steps? A lot of it we really can't answer because we're unsure. We don't know if the governor will extend the executive orders. If he does, then our rules will have to be extended as well. If he doesn't, then like the rules that's on the screen, they would just expire after 120 days, which would be in August, unless the board adopts these on a permanent basis. But if you guys are responding to rules that are outside of the rules that's currently showing, then they must be connected to an executive order. It could be several executive orders, actually. And that would kind of just depend on the direction of the governor. If he extends those orders that allowed for these emergency licenses, then the division would continue with that direction and would also extend those licenses. I don't know if that helps to clarify. It's just a really unprecedented situation. So the division is just working really closely with the governor's office just to make sure that we are complying with his orders. But once again, we were not quite sure if they'll be extended or what's the status there.
Okay, thank you, Elena, for clarifying that. If anyone has further comments or questions related to that, feel free to let us know. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next attendee who has asked to be allowed to speak. And so that is Francis Ricker. Francis, you're unmuted. Francis, can you hear us?
This is Francis. I didn't have a question. I don't know where that came from.
Okay, so you don't want to speak, that's fine. I can go ahead and mute you. Okay, thank you. If you do change your mind, Francis, just go ahead and raise your hand again or send a question or comment. All right, Ingrid Johnson. You are unmuted, Ingrid Johnson.
Yeah. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, I am with the Colorado Center for Nursing Excellence, the state of Colorado's Nursing Workforce Center. And we worked very closely with the Colorado Council of Nurse Educators on the Section F, which are the education waivers, A through G. The intention of those requests was to help our soon-to-graduate seniors get out of school and hopefully enter the workforce. We know they'd had a lot of clinical experience already. So we wanted to get them out and get them going, and we were concerned about getting a backlog there. So these recommendations, which came from the Colorado Center for Nursing Excellence and the Colorado Council of Nurse Educators, were never meant to be permanent. And so we would request that they not be permanent and that the board consider extending them for 1 year to give the schools the opportunity to plan for their coming clinicals for the next school year, because we don't know what COVID is going to bring, and we don't know what those clinical experience opportunities will be. We also want to ask you to give us some time to gather data around this. How are these newly graduated nurses who had more simulation than we've seen in the past managing? Are they doing well? Do they need extra experience? Do we need to get them into residency? What is that? How does that impact? What are their Nclex pass rates? We don't know any of this. And so we would ask that the board extend this for a year, you know, to June 15th at a minimum, and even maybe as far as September 30th of 2021, so we can gather data around this, because we simply don't know what the long-term outcomes will be. So that's our request. And I would like to echo Colleen Kasper's request for demand data for the temporary licenses. How many temporary licenses have gone out? I'd be interested to find out how many of those new nurses with the temporary licenses are actually working in facilities. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, this is Elena. Ms. Johnson, if you could just clarify that we are on the correct portion of the rule that you're referring to, so I can put in notes.
Yes, you are. And this is the correct area, and I have sent you in a written response or stakeholder response as well.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's helpful.
And Ms. Johnson, and for the other person earlier who was interested in receiving information on the data regarding temporary nurses, as Elena mentioned, you can contact our public information officer, Lee Resizer. His email is lee, Resizer, which is spelled RASIZER @state.co.us. Again, lee.rasizer @state.co.us to submit that CORA request regarding the different temporary licenses, the number of licenses and whatnot. So feel free to go ahead and do that if you are interested in the data. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next person who has indicated that they would like to speak. That is Kathleen McInnes. Kathleen McInnes, you are unmuted. Kathleen, are you there? Kathleen? Okay, looks like your audio may not be working. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute you again, and we can come back to you. And once you see if you can figure out your audio, otherwise I see you might have a question submitted, and we'll get to the written comments here in a minute. All right. Let me see if there's anybody else with their hand raised. All right, we have Loretta Nash. Loretta Nash, you're unmuted.
Hi, thanks. My questions and comments, I guess, are regarding the non-traditional refresher students, and there's a variety of us. I think the rules apply to how long you've been out of practice, some between 2 to 5 years and then some 5 to 10. I'm in the 2 to 5 year category and have been attending and just passed the theory portion of the classwork. Many of us in my situation, and then I passed the final exam, but many of us then went to the next step and reached a roadblock with that because the clinicals, even the simulations, I guess we weren't candidates for us. I think the clinicals are going to be opening back up, but my comments though really are not even just about myself. I am in favor of the temporary licenses becoming permanent, and here's why. I had not done that because in March, when that capability was presented, I weighed my options because it looked as though you might just have to work volunteer, and it was kind of iffy as to whether you could even get hired. And I have gotten feedback from other students who did activate under the temporary measure that they've not been able to get anyone to hire them on a temporary basis. So I opted to just keep pushing on with my classwork and just seeing how things played out. But then I guess, even though I think someone earlier had pointed out that as a non-traditional refresher student that were considered graduates, however, the new graduates from for traditional programs were able to do the simulation clinicals, whereas I mean, in my own case, plus 30 something years of a variety of backgrounds in nursing, were not considered candidates for that. The other thing that really bothered me about the temporary measure was that it was as if the state of Colorado, the Board of Nursing, would be completely okay allowing us to work on a temporary basis without perhaps even gone through the refresher courses or anything. But then suddenly when it goes away, you're back to wearing a student hat. That didn't make sense to me, how we were trustworthy enough to be put into the workforce, but then they would take it away. That bothered me. And I don't know if anyone else feels that same way, but I'm just wondering. And then also, even if the clinical portion, if we were to be allowed to go back into the workforce, my understanding was that it's still not clear if they would waive even the clinical portion of what is required for the non-traditional students. Those are just some comments that I have and concerns, I guess, but I've just been pressing on and just trying to now await the clinical, since we're not candidates for the simulation labs, but there's many of us out there at various points in that spectrum with the classwork, then the final exam, and then leading to the clinicals that would just love to be a part of the workforce in Colorado again and demonstrate competency. If we are to be allowed to go back in the field and work, then it just seems that should be a demonstration of our competency for sure, and at least waive the clinicals portion of the refresher courses. But anyway, just wanted to comment on that, and that was all that I had.
Ms. Nash,
Okay.
This is Elena. I just wanted to make sure I captured your comment correctly. So you want to waive the clinical portion of the refresher course? Is that correct?
No, I mean, honestly, I feel like that if they allow us to be issued the temporary license and we get back into the workforce, that I am in favor of that, irregardless that it should be made permanent. That's the side I'm coming out on. But, that I would think that if we were trustworthy enough to be allowed to do that to begin with, that it seems as though that should be evidence to the board enough, if even if they had to verify that feedback, that we should be given the permanent status with our licenses. For those of us being reinstated that have worked as nurses, many of us for many years, and just, I guess for some, just took a sabbatical or whatnot.
Okay.
This is Laura. Would you characterize what you're saying then basically as be able to waive the clinical experience if you had demonstration of work under the temporary license that was adequate to the board?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Does that help, Elena?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for your comment. And just, I got a couple questions quick right now that said, Diane Lepsy agrees with the current comment. This also bothers me, and it bothers DPO, and it bothers the governor. I will fight to get this issue on the agenda. Thank you for your echoing of that, Ms. Lepsy. And then I have a question from Kathleen McInnes, whose audio was not working. I'm going to go ahead and read out. The question is, I did see that perhaps temporary licenses might be extended until 12/31 for non-traditional refresher students. Do you have any comments on that, Roberta?
Well, right now, that's how long the temporary license is good for.
Okay,
I'm not sure if he's talking about her students with refresher course only licenses, or if she's talking about the temporary licenses that were issued for people who were trying to reinstate.
She specified it was non-traditional refresher students, if that's helpful.
Okay. Okay, well, these temporary licenses are good, I thought, through December 31st.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let me go to the next person who I see has a hand raised, if I can find anybody. Mary Stiegel. I might have mispronounced your name, I apologize. Mary, you're unmuted. Mary Stiegel. Mary, can you hear us? Can you speak? We're not really hearing anything.
I did not intend to raise a hand.
Oh, okay. Thank you for clarifying. I will go ahead and unmute or mute you again. All right, let me continue on. All right. Simona, I'm probably going to mispronounce your name, and I apologize in advance. Parvulescu Kudrowa? Simona?
Yes, hi.
I apologize.
Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, we can.
Hi, how are you?
Can you please introduce yourself? Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity of raising my question. I am concerned with the start of the clinical sites for nursing. Many of the schools I did reach to, they stated that they await your decision as BON in reference to when we can get back. And my question to you is if you plan on issuing any type of guidance in this regard, and you plan on contacting governor in reference to visitation rules. Also, so there are kind of three questions. Also, the clinical sites, many of them were unaware of temporary rules. My question is, what is your strategy on disseminating and making public these rules? Thank you.
Elena or Roberta?
Hi, this is. I'm going to ask her to type out her questions because I couldn't understand them.
Yeah, Simona, we're getting quite a bit of feedback when you speak. I do see you submitted a question a little while ago. I'm going to go ahead and read that for now, but feel free to submit your other questions if there are additional questions. So her written question from a little while ago is, what is the board's intention with reference to communicating to the governor about making these rules permanent, since clinical facilities claim to be waiting for the governor's instruction regarding clinical? It does not appear all facilities are in tune with the rules. How do we make them consistent with all facilities?
Yes, this is the question.
Okay, so that was one of her questions. Roberta, do you have any thoughts on ensuring that the facilities are consistently following the rules?
I guess I don't know exactly what context we're talking about. I think our agency is being guided by the governor, and there is constant dialogue with the governor's office through our senior management, and so I think that is in place. So if there's something we need to communicate that we aren't aware of, maybe that could be typed up. I'm not sure, but we have no jurisdiction over healthcare facilities. We have jurisdiction over licensees and over education, basic pre-licensure nursing education programs. So I don't know if that helps in terms of creating the context of what we're really able to pass rules about.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, Roberta. Simone, if you have follow-up questions, if you can go ahead and use the question feature again, and we'll try to get back to you. Otherwise, you can go ahead and submit written questions or comments, and the board will be able to review those regardless. Thank you. All right, let me start at the top and see if I see any new raised hands. Ani Mott.
Yes.
Annie Matt?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. So my name is Annie Matt, and I am a nurse educator. And I just wanted to second what Ingrid, I think it was Ingrid that had mentioned about from the nursing education standpoint, the need to, as opposed to making it permanent, actually just extend it. I just really want to second that I don't think we have enough data to make this a permanent adoption. From a nursing education standpoint, I think we don't know how these students are we don't know, are they passing their exam, their Nclex, you know, we just don't know enough, I think, to make it permanent. So I just wanted to second Ingrid's comments about that. I agree with that.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let me continue on. We'll do a couple more verbal comments, and then we'll switch over to some of the written comments, and I'll read those. Carrie Brunson, I see you have your hand raised. However, you don't seem to have audio set up. So I see you might have already submitted a question, but if you want to speak, you can enter your PIN on your telephone. And I just sent it to you. Otherwise, we'll look to read your written comment. I'm going to go ahead and lower your hand, so feel free to raise it again if you have audio set up again later. Let me see who else has raised their hand. Ellen Stern.
Hi,
Ellen
this is
Stern.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have two comments or questions. So I know the Nurse Practice Act just passed the legislature this year. Can you share more about the timeline for adoption of those rules versus the potential for making these rules permanent?
Ellen, so the Sunset Bill did pass, and so the Nurse Practice Act will be continued. You are indeed correct. I think that the board will be taking those under consideration. I'm not sure that the governor's even signed that bill, so I think, you know, once the governor does sign that or that bill becomes effective, assuming that he does, I would imagine he will. But once that happens, then the Board of Nursing will be able to start any rulemaking that's necessary to, you know, make everything, you know, congruent. But we have to wait for the governor's signature or for that bill to go ahead and transition into law automatically within 30 days. So we're still waiting on that piece. And then once that's done, the Board of Nursing will take rulemaking into consideration. You know, regular rulemaking is a process of several months. So it'll be a little bit separate process than these temporary rules. Does that help?
That's very helpful. Thank you. And then I think I would just echo a couple comments about the need for data to inform the ultimate decision about whether these rules are made permanent or not. It seems like it would benefit the board to have information about the number of temporary licenses that are being issued. And I know that there was a request that a Cora request to get that information, but it would seem that as part of the stakeholder process, that information should be made available so that the board can consider that as part of all of the issues they're looking at when they take this up in August. So just a comment.
Okay, thank you. Elena, do you have any follow-up on that, or are you good?
No, I'm okay. She's just basically saying that we need more research. But I do want to know, do you support the temporary licensure, or are you saying that the board just absolutely needs more research before making this decision?
I don't have a position per se. I'm just encouraging more information about whether it seems like these rules need to be made permanent. If they're not being used, or if they are being used, that's great. You know, part of the consideration process should be how they're being used.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hold on while I look for the next person. Let me see if I see anybody new who hasn't spoken yet. Hold on 1 minute. Tammy Spencer?
Yes, this is Tammy.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, this is Tammy Spencer. I'm a faculty member at the CU College of Nursing, and I'm also president of the Colorado Council of Nurse Educators, and have worked closely with the Colorado Center of Nursing Excellence and support Ingrid comments regarding concerns about permanent adoption of the emergency rules. This is a very impactful decision, and we as the Colorado Council of Nurse Educators feel that there needs to be more data collected to support the permanent adoption of these emergency rules, and also feel that the voices of our clinical agencies need to be considered in the permanent adoption. Also concerned about the impact, the quality of new nursing education programs initiated in the state of Colorado, how these the permanent adoption of these emergency rules would impact the quality of new nursing education programs, and also feel that a broader perspective and look at the healthcare communities that we serve, including the rural communities, in terms of adoption of these emergency rules. So would also like to recommend that a task force be formulated of key stakeholders to include our clinical partners, our nurse educators, faculty, leaders, nursing students, and patients that we are ultimately charged to care for and protect. And the focus of that task force would be to gather data over the next 15 months. We'd like to see these emergency rules extended until September of 2021 to allow for that data to be collected and other key metrics to be collected in order to make a sound decision about adoption of the emergency rules. And these were all put in written comments as well that were submitted last week. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, at this time I don't see any folks who haven't spoken yet who have raised their hand. So I'm going to switch over to some written comments. Again, if you would like to speak, go ahead and raise your hand. And I'll come back to those folks in a few minutes, but I'm going to start at the top of the written comments for now that we've received via the chat features. So we had a question, but it looks like this person has left. And I'm going to go ahead and read it. It says, my name is Kasim Bulama Wakabli. I really apologize to this person whose name I mispronounced. She's registered here. She is registered with the Colorado Board of Nursing. And the question was related to are temporary registered nurses who are new graduates allowed to be treating COVID-19 patients, or will there be supervision for some period before they're treating COVID-19 patients? I'm not sure if that's something that these rules are addressing at this stage. And so whether that's
the rules, this is Roberta Hills. The rules say that the graduates can practice nursing under supervision. They have to be supervised by a licensed registered nurse.
Okay, thank you. Georgia Hopeland asked, what will happen with CNA students who apply for temporary licensure and may have been working full-time through maybe December? I'm not sure if you have a comment on that, or Roberta, by chance. Otherwise, we can just let the board consider that question.
Well, I think if the temporary license does not get extended in the rulemaking in August, then those folks will need to have applied and passed their certification exam in order to have an active nurse aid certification.
Okay, thank you. Mary Watson, registered nurse, asked if these are to be permanent, could you define permanent? Will they expire at a time when COVID-19 is cured? So Mary, I think that is, we appreciate your feedback on that. Whether this is a temporary, a more long temporary period, or if permanent just means permanent. As of now, and Elena, you can chime in here, these are adopted as permanent. They would just be enforced until the board changes its rules, unless they put a set time frame in the rule itself. Is that correct?
That's correct. I wonder about the scope of that question, though. I don't know if she's actually intending to ask the rulemaking process itself, because at this point, what's happening is these rules are in effect until the end of August. But in August, the board is going to have to hold an emergency rulemaking hearing and a permanent rulemaking hearing, because the permanent rulemaking process takes so long. It takes several months to complete. So to allow for these rules to still be in place, they'll have to hold another emergency rulemaking hearing so that these get extended. So there's no lapse in the rule. So that will happen in August. It'll actually be 2 hearings on the same day. The emergency is just to allow for the rules to be extended while the permanent rules are going through the motions and going through the rulemaking process per APA. But I wonder about the scope of her question, because, and I don't know if she would like to speak, and I'm sorry, I've been listening, but I didn't get the name of the person that submitted.
This is Mary Watson. I see she submitted a question. Let me check and see if she submitted a follow-up. I don't see a follow-up, but all it says is, I'll repeat the question. If these are to be permanent, could you define permanence? Will they expire at a time when COVID-19 is cured?
Yeah, and that's what makes me wonder about the actual scope of her question. Like, but I think that that's probably a good thing for the board to consider. So I definitely will just wait for them to chime in. And the board will
so Mary,
questions as well. Like all the written comments that are received on this webinar, I'm not really typing them in to the document that you guys are currently looking at, because it's easier for us to just give those comments to the board. So they will be able to see the exact language that you're proposing or the exact questions that you're asking. So please continue.
Okay. It looks like Mary has raised her hand, so would like to go ahead and speak to clarify. Mary?
Okay, I'm hoping you guys can hear me. I'm mainly concerned about this in relation to CNA licensing. On Monday and Tuesday of this week, we heard, and I heard it referred to here, but we heard that licensing is going to be suspended through the end of the year and is expected to resume on the 1st of January. So at this point, I'm wondering how permanent is permanent. If they don't even resume state boards until January, and there's a huge backlog, I figure it'll be until, March or June before we get this thing together as far as it goes. And I'm wondering, when we talk about making these things permanent, and yet they've got end dates in them, for 120 days afterwards and so on, could we put verbiage in here somewhere that says these permanent rules will expire upon some sort of criteria, like when some sort of criteria for when they're no longer needed? Thank you.
Okay, Elena, did you catch that? And do you have any questions or follow-up for Ms. Watson?
I did catch that. But once again, I'm going to wait for the board to chime in. So.
Oh, this is Roberta Hills, and I would say that's an excellent comment. And I think the board members, that's how they're going to have to look at it, try to figure out how to word it so that it makes sense for public safety and yet keeps the workforce flowing.
Okay, great. I think I saw a couple hands raised. Let me see if anyone hasn't spoken yet. Let me just check.
It looks like Kathleen McClinnis has had her hand raised for quite a bit.
Yep, we were having audio issues with her for a while. I can check back in and see if that is working yet. Let's see if that's working. Kathleen, are you able to speak now? Kathleen McInnes? Okay, looks like that audio is still not working.
Okay.
All right, nope, you're good. And Lisa Cloutier, you've raised your hand. In order to speak, you would need to enter your PIN. I'm sending it to you now. You go ahead and enter it. I can unmute you to speak, so feel free to do that, and we can circle back with you as well. Let me see if I see anybody else with a hand raised. Otherwise, I'll continue on with written comments. All right, I don't see anybody else at this time. So I'm going to switch back over to the written comments that we've received so far. Bianca Ortiz stated, I'm a program coordinator for a CNA school in Colorado Springs. I think it would be beneficial to have the 16 hours of clinicals optional in a clinical facility. The risk, even after COVID is over, I believe will be a concern for quite some time as multiple students are around the residents. How likely is it that we can make clinicals in a simulated setting in the classroom? All right, thank you for that recommendation regarding the clinical hours. All right, Diane Powell says, students cannot test, clarifying CNAs, as Pearson is changing the platform and who knows how long before they open. I have students that have been waiting months already. I don't imagine they will be able to test for another several more months. How will we address this? I believe, Roberta, you spoke to this earlier, that the board is working to look at options. Is that correct?
That's right. That's what these emergency rules will do for those kinds of situations. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Diane, if you have follow-up or if you have a recommendation of how this can be addressed, please let us know. Here's a comment from Kathleen McInnes, whose audio is not working. If these rules are permanently adopted, would nurses no longer need to pursue refresher courses for relicensure? Refresher courses assist nurses to identify gaps in knowledge that are critically important to know and remedy deficiencies. Looks like she has now gone offline, but it sounds like she would recommend that we look at refresher courses and how they might be used or not used in the future. The board can consider her comment in their deliberations.
Right. I recommend that she put in her her recommendations in terms of how to address people who've been out of practice for many years.
Okay. Kathleen, looks like you might be back online, Kathleen McInnes. So we appreciate your comment, your question. If you have a recommendation regarding those refresher courses and how they should be incorporated or not, please let us know. Thank you. All right. Mary Watson, RN, noted, how do the rules apply to professionals working for a home health agency, Class A or B, who work in private homes regarding supervision? I believe we might have talked about this earlier. I'm not sure, Roberta, if you have any other follow-up regarding supervision in private homes from a home health agency.
Well, I would just say that we have to read the definitions of supervision that we have and follow those, follow it. In the rules right now, it uses the term direct supervision. And so that's as much as we have. And so I think it means at least, at minimum, a phone call away or readily available.
Okay, great. Thank you, Roberta. We have a comment from Kimberly Montejano, who has left the webinar, but would like to note that she supports for this to be fully and permanently adopted. So thank you, Kimberly, even though you have left. Amanda Clerkin of Otero Junior College is in favor of keeping temporary licensure as part of permanent rules, as long as if exams are failed, this will be revoked. So thank you for stating your recommendation, Amanda Clerkin. Tammy Spencer had a question of other options, other than permanent adoption, what are the other options for emergency rules? Is there a task force? Is there discussion of a task force to discuss the implications of permanent adoption of the ER or extending the ER until September 21 to allow for collection of data and information from key stakeholders prior to making the decision for permanent adoption? So it sounds like this question, I believe we spoke to Tammy Spencer earlier. She's asking, you know, at the next hearing, is the only option to make the rules permanent or to let them expire? Elena, I don't know if you have any comments regarding what the board's options regarding these rules at when they make their decision.
I think it's wide open. Yeah, one thing I'd like to, I found the definition of direct supervision in these rules. And so I was wrong. It is not a telephone call away. It means the licensed professional nurse must be on the premise with the temporary practical nurse and immediately available to respond to an emergency. So that's, if that definition is there, that's what it means for CNAs as well.
Okay.
So,
thank you for clarifying that, Roberta. So if anyone has a recommendation for changing that definition, they should submit a comment regarding that. But as of now, that is the draft definition that the board may consider. The board may make changes to that, obviously, based on stakeholder feedback, though. So if you have a recommendation for changes or you're in support of that language, please let us know. And then getting back to Tammy Spencer's comment, so my understanding is at the hearing, the board can adopt these rules as they are. They could, you know, make changes if they would like to any parts of these based on the stakeholder feedback and their professional opinions and the board's expertise, or they could let them lapse. So the board has many options when they consider these rules at the next hearing. So it's not just adopt or not adopt. They will be able to make changes as needed based on feedback and other considerations. If anyone has any questions on those, please let us know.
Sorry, this is Elena. Roberta, do you have is the board meeting between now and the August 19th rulemaking hearing?
I didn't get the question.
I'm sorry that I don't know the answer to this, but I was just trying to see if the board was going to meet between now and August 19th.
You're breaking up a little bit, Elena, but I think you're just asking when does the board meet next, and is it before the rulemaking hearing?
Yeah, July 22nd is July 22nd is the next full board meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great. Thank you. All right. So I see a few people who have raised their hands. So I'm going to switch back over at this time to folks who have raised their hand. Colleen, Casper, I see you raised your hand. I know you spoke earlier, but I'm not sure if you have further questions. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Colleen, Casper.
Thank you, and I apologize for my disconnect earlier, but I just wanted to reinforce the requests and recommendations made by the Colorado Council of Nurse Educators and the Center for Nursing Excellence to not make the Section F, A through G permanent at this time until we have a robust stakeholder process to look at metrics and outcomes related to those changes. And then the other question I had is there any consideration being given to, I've got to find the words here, to extend the nursing emergency scope orders that were written? So they're more specific to the APR and scope of practice. So that's just a plain no.
Yes, the reason is that the board doesn't have statutory authority to change the scope of, like scope expansion. It's kind of It's one of those unprecedented things. But the governor gave the authority to the director to allow for scope expansion. But as soon as that executive order is no longer effective, neither do those scope expansion rules. And the board doesn't, like I said, the board doesn't have statutory authority to make that type of decision. So those rules are going to just fall off after 120 days unless the governor extends it.
Okay, I did see the medical board included those scope emergency orders in their documents for the same process, their stakeholder process to build permanent rules. So I just wondered why the difference in nursing, but I guess that explains it.
No, I totally understand. And actually, just to answer your question, when the medical board, when the notice for their stakeholder meeting went out, it did include the scope expansion rules, but the division decided to include the scope expansion rules just to inform the public. There is a note in that notice that says the only rules that are actually going to be considered for permanent rulemaking are the licensing emergency rules. The scope expansion was just to make sure everybody knew that that was adopted on an emergency basis.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next person who would like to speak. Deanna McCoy. You're self-muted, it looks like. Deanna. Deanna McCoy. It looks like you may have your phone or your computer on mute. Okay, well, we'll come back to you, Deanna, and see if you'll be able to clarify your audio situation. Let me see if there's anybody else who has their hand raised. Please bear with me. Okay, I don't see anyone else at this time. Also, I'm going to switch back to written comments for now. Please feel free to raise your hand, though, if you would like to speak, or if you're Ms. McCoy and you're able to fix your audio, raise your hand again, and we will get back to you. So the next written comment is from, let me get the name, Ivana Loos. I apologize for mispronouncing your name. FNP with Colorado Primary Care Clinic. I'm sending this question on behalf of Dr. Don Fetzko, DNP, the owner of the Colorado Primary Care Clinic, who could not attend today. I want to make sure that the following are added for consideration in the permanent adoption. Let me make sure I can read this whole comment. These comments directly apply to Executive Order D-2020-038 under Section E.1.D, add number 3. And that number 3 would say, are you caught up, Elena, where we are?
I thought that they're referring to the executive order as opposed to the rule, or is it the rule that they're talking about?
Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and read the comment then regardless. It says, an APRN shall be granted provisional prescriptive authority to include prescribing controlled substances under the direct supervision of an APRN granted full prescriptive authority in good standing. And also a number 4 to say that an APRN shall be granted permission to apply hours earned toward full prescriptive authority. And a number 5 that an APRN shall not be required to complete an articulated plan. So I believe those are more scope questions and comments, and they're also related to the executive order. Is that correct, Roberta or Elena?
Yeah, it's not in these rules.
Okay, great. So thank you for your comment, but they're not under consideration at this time for these types of changes. If you have any questions about that, please let us know. I'm going to move on to the next one now. Hope Silspulski had a question. I'm not sure regarding, she just said, can someone repeat what she said? And then something about virtual simulation she had a question about. So Hope, I'm not sure what you're referring to. If you can please type in a full question or comment. I'm not understanding your partial comment, but we are recording that in case that is useful for the board. And then same thing, Colleen Casper made a comment of, is she talking about nursing emergency scope expansion? Unfortunately, I'm not sure who you're referencing. So if you have a comment or question, please let us know specifically what that full comment or question is. Cindy Mills noted, I'm in support of this. And does this apply to LPNs? And Roberta, I believe you already stated that these temporary rules are related to LPNs, correct?
It is related to LPNs as well as the practical nursing education.
Okay, thank you. And then Joanne Del Monte asked, is there a documented length of time an individual must wait between Nclex attempts if unsuccessful in a first attempt? Roberta, do you have any comment on that?
45 days.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Balama Wakibu Kasim, who has left the webinar, stated, it's not a bad idea giving temp licenses to new graduates, but I strongly believe that for effective healthcare delivery, the government should look at how to allow more experienced foreign nurses to come into the state by easing some immigration process. This will enable good hands handling a number of cases. Thank you for that comment. I'm going to move on to the next one unless Elena or Roberta has a comment as well.
Nope,
all right. Carrie Brunson states, there were some issues with the audio. I think we might have fixed the audio feedback. So I'm hoping that all the folks that had questions regarding audio, you can hear us better now. And then Diane Lufty, we clarified your emergency licenses, I believe, but please let us know if not. Paula Busey is an instructor of CNA students. She states, I am in favor of making the rules permanent, especially for CNAs for the following reasons. Let me make sure I can read this whole comment. There is no way of knowing when this pandemic will end. The rules to end in-person clinicals will protect nursing home residents, staff, and students. This may also protect the same people with flu and norovirus outbreaks. The online environment has allowed parent CNAs with medically fragile children to safely achieve temporary licensure. This has also been beneficial to prospective CNAs in rural areas to take courses and to many students who want to become CNAs who currently work full-time. Thank you for that comment, Paula. It is noted. All right. There was a question from Cindy Mills, who has left, asking, how do these rules apply to LPNs that are not new grads? I'm not sure, Roberta, if you have a comment regarding LPNs who are not new graduates. Or if you've already addressed that.
She's probably she's maybe referring to an expired LPN license. Mm-hmm. So they were actually under the emergency rules is where the governor allowed those folks to go ahead and get the emergency license. And as people have reminded us, that license expires June 30th.
Okay, great, thank you. Mary Watson asked about individuals from out of state with current licenses in that state considered as emergency licenses. Is there a way to verify emergency licenses? So I'm not sure if anyone has, Elena or Roberta has any comments regarding the applicability to individuals from with out of state licenses. Or if not, maybe if you need more clarification, perhaps Ms. Watson can clarify.
I'm sorry.
Let us know.
The question was people with out-of-state licenses. Is there any way for us to verify that they have an out-of-state license?
The question states, are individuals from out of state with current licenses in that state considered as emergency licenses? And then there's a second question that says, is there a way to verify emergency licenses? So it's a two-part question. I'm not sure if either part are things that are addressed in these temporary rules, or if you have any other questions or comments, or if you might need some clarification from the question asker.
What I would do is go into nurses if they're talking about RNs or LPNs, and just you can check that way. I don't know. I'm assuming these, I haven't looked, so I don't know if these temporary licenses are being transferred into nurses. I think it's a good question. I'm assuming an employer is wondering that. I don't know.
Okay, so Mary Watson, we don't have an answer for you right now, but that's something that the board can consider, you know, when they're looking at these rules regarding temporary licenses and what that looks like in tracking systems and whatnot, and whether there's any sort of impact there.
That question could answer.
All right, I see.
We could potentially answer a question. It just, at the moment, it's just hard to answer it off the fly. Maybe a little bit of investigation would be helpful, and I could reach out later.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Elena. So I see a hand raised. Kathy Hart, you're unmuted.
Hi there. I'm asking this. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
I'm asking this question for Deanna McCoy because you guys couldn't hear her earlier. She wants to know the likelihood of getting the skills portion for nurse aid eliminated.
What portion of the rule are you referring to? This is Elena.
She's talking about the skills portion for the nurse aid courses. And I don't know.
It's in the federal, the nurse aid courses are, in a sense, regulated by the federal government through CMS. And those rules come from the late 80s. And when you look at it, it states that the competency evaluation has to be a knowledge and a skills test. So I don't know, and each state is required to meet the federal rules. So I don't see that happening.
Okay.
You can recommend it if you want, but
she's suggesting just the exam portion.
That's what it is. The competency evaluation includes both. It's written in the rules, and so that's why it's also written in our rules.
Okay.
But it comes from the federal government.
All right,
and
that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kathy and Deanna. Appreciate your teamwork there. Let me see if I see anybody else who has their hand raised. Hold on 1 minute. I just saw somebody. All right, I don't see anyone who hasn't spoken yet who has their hand raised, so bear with me while I go back to the written comments. Written comment from Kathleen McInnes. I am not in support of permanent licensure for previously licensed nurses due to patient safety concerns and gaps in clinical practice. One change could be potentially for nurses whose license has been expired 2 to 5 years to take only the didactic part of the course, in other words, waive clinical. Nurses whose license is greater than 5 years could do course and clinical component. So that's the recommendation from Kathleen McInnes regarding previously licensed nurses and relicensure for those folks. Thank you for that. All right. I see a comment from Colleen Casper regarding the scope expansion. I think we've already addressed your comment, Colleen, but if not, please let me know. Diane Lutfi states, my recommendation is for them to grant full licensure, especially because they are currently practicing nursing with their emergency license. Thank you for that. Jeanette Rodriguez stated, what would the qualifications for temporary license be? Would all coursework be required to apply for the temporary license, or would capstone students be able to obtain a temporary license as well? I believe the rules would currently address what are the requirements for temporary licensure. Is that correct, Elena or Roberta? They have requirements set in there?
They do.
Already?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Jeanette, if you have a recommendation for any changes to what's in the temporary, the emergency rules that are being considered for permanent adoption, please let us know. But they're actually currently laid out, the qualifications in the temporary new rules that are currently on the screen. Please let us know if you have further questions. Let me check to see if any written or verbal comments are coming in. All right. Let me come back to the written then. Kathleen McInnes, I'm not sure what reference this is. It says, can they do virtual simulation for the clinical component? I'm not sure, Roberta, if you have any clarification on doing virtual simulation.
Kathleen needs to make that recommendation. It's the refresher programs are for people who've been out of practice, and the board requires they have to demonstrate current competency. And right now, if you have not practiced within 2 years, then you have to demonstrate competency. And the main method for doing it is the refresher program. But if, as I said earlier, if you have been out there practicing on these temporary licenses, the board may actually consider that. You just have to ask and provide evidence of what you've been doing. But if the refresher programs would like to, or feel that they can work with their students and show competence through simulation, that they should ask the board to consider that.
Okay, thank you. I believe your comment just now actually addresses another comment by Diana Lutfi that states, talking about non-traditional refresher students that have their emergency licenses, given that they are not able to do clinical contact hours, wouldn't it make sense for everyone to let them have active licensure? So it sounds like what you're suggesting is that, you know, there might be a way for the hours that they're working under their temporary license, those hours, the board may consider those in lieu of clinical hours. But that's something that each person would need to ask the board for.
Right.
But Diana, let's see, if you have a recommendation that would apply to, you know, candidates across the board that you would like to see in the rules, please let us know. Jody Garcia, I see you have your hand raised. I see a comment from you actually just now, it's from a while ago, but I see it now, stating, I'd like to support the suspension of nurse aid skills testing requirements. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you to see if you want to clarify, expand, or add any other comments. Jody Garcia, you're unmuted.
Hello, thank you. This is Dr. Jody Garcia. Just on my comment, I think was answered already. I had an additional comment on the temporary license for professional nursing, as well as practical and nurse aid. And the ruling, my thoughts were in the comments or the documentation that this be in like pandemic situations. I'm not totally in favor of the temporary license for new graduates on an ongoing basis. Once testing facilities are more up to speed on that regard.
Okay, thank you for your comment. That is being noted. Thank you. All right, I don't see anyone else who hasn't spoken yet asking to speak, so I'm going to switch back to the written comments. There's a comment from Jody Hammerly. I'm taking an RN refresher course due to my RN license being expired. After the completion of the course and the final exam, we are required to complete the final portion of the course, which is 120 hours at a clinical site. Hold on, I'm trying to read the whole question. We are required to complete a skills check having some technical difficulties here, bear with me. List. Many who have finished the course are having difficulty finding clinical sites to complete their RN refresher course due to COVID-19. This is also the case for new graduate nursing students. There was talk of completing an online clinical simulation instead of going to a clinical site. Is this something that would be considered due to the circumstances of COVID-19 and the challenge of finding a clinical site? This is particularly important to me because I plan on using my RN license to work from home and not in an in-hospital clinical setting. So thank you for that comment. Roberta or Elena, do you have any follow-up or questions on that or anything else?
No, I think it's a comment that should be added. Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right. Patricia Abbott has asked, what is the rationale for making the temporals permanent at this time before there is data and an understanding of what COVID-19 will look like in 1 year? If this has been addressed, I apologize. I'm having connection issues. I'm very concerned if the rules become permanent. There is a risk for quality and safety of new grads. I would recommend collecting data for the next 15 months and reconsider at that time. Thank you for your recommendation, Patricia Abbott. That has been noted.
I would help people understand that the reason that this is happening this way is because that's how it is in the legislation, that's how it is in the document. We're required to do this.
Great, thank you for clarifying, Roberta.
Yeah.
Diane Powell would like for an email address to send recommendations, please. Elena, can you provide that email address so people can send follow-up comments and questions to, please, regarding these rules?
Yes, this is Elena. So the centralized rulemaking inbox that you guys want to send all written comments to is Dora, DORA, _ DPO _ rulemaking, and that's one word, at state.co.us. And I did want,
thank you, Elena.
There was a comment previously mentioned. Yes, the board or the director actually had to promulgate rules to meet the requirements of the executive order. Well, there's several executive orders, but specifically Executive Order D 2020-038. But at the last board meeting, the board decided that they were going to continue and wanted to make, or at least wanted to get stakeholder feedback on whether or not these rules should become permanent. But I didn't want to confuse the process. It initially was ordered through that executive order. The director made these changes because the director was given the authority to do rulemaking, and then the board decided they wanted to continue. And so now we're just getting the stakeholder feedback based on that. Like, the board wants to continue. Now we want to know how the public feels. Do you guys want to continue with these rules as well? So nothing is like sketched in stone. There's nothing that is saying that these rules have to continue. You know, I just wanted to clarify.
But Elena, it's true that if the board had said no, they didn't want to, everything would expire?
Yes, at the end of August.
Right.
Just these rules. Just the rules that are on the screen now. But yes.
All right. I don't see any hands raised. I see one, Simona Parvalescu Codreo. Again, I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing your name. I know we had some connectivity issues earlier. I want to go ahead and try to unmute you, and we'll see if the audio is any better. Simona?
Hi again. Thank you for the opportunity. I was thinking if in the light of what the Council for Nurse Educators in Colorado suggested namely to analyze data related to temporary licensure and outcomes. Will the Board of Nursing be willing to work with us on providing us data in this regard? Because we do not know how many temporary licensure the board issued. So we can work with the colleges, with the graduates, and get data, but are we going to benefit from board's help as well?
Okay, it sounds like you were asking about, I see your comment that you submitted online as well. It sounds like you're just asking for the data to be able to analyze that regarding the number of temporary licenses. And so that makes sense. And your comment on the chat was, is the Board of Nursing willing to provide data to the Colorado Council for Nurse Educators so we can look at the outcomes associated with temporary licensure? And so again, as Elena mentioned, it'll be best if you submit your request for this to our Public Information Officer as a CORA request, which is an open records request, just so we can make sure everything's compiled appropriately. And his name is Lee Resizer. And again, his email is lee.rasizer@state.co.us. And he'll be able to coordinate with you to get you the data that you're looking for. Hopefully that helps it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Would it be possible to type it in the chat, please? I was unprepared to take notes.
Yes, I think I might be able to. I haven't done that before. Let me try that.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to send it to everyone. And then in the meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. I'll send that out shortly while I'm getting to other questions. Let's see. Let's see if I have any other new comments from new people. We had a comment from Christy Hargrave saying, I would like to recommend the rules be extended for another year, but not permanently at this time. This would allow us to have the changes in place to adapt to the lack of clinical placements at the BSN level for the next year, which would be a benefit. However, I don't think we want to waive the requirement permanently as it benefits students to be in seat for their clinicals when they are able to return. So Christy, thank you for your comment. Leslie Reeder asked, can you discuss the liability that the supervising nurse or organization incurs from oversight of a professional with a temp license? I don't know if there's any comments you might have on that, Roberta.
What was the question again?
Leslie Reeder is asking about the liability that supervising nurses or organizations incur for oversight of a professional with a temporary license.
I think I don't have any comment because I don't know the liability. All I know is that if you're supervising someone, you do have to make sure they know what they're doing and that they're competent in doing what they're doing. And so you wouldn't let them do it on their own until you were sure they were competent.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Let's see. I'll look for someone who we haven't heard from yet. And then I'll circle back to everybody else if we have time. Corey Dennis. This is Corey Dennis with Community College of Denver's Nurse Aid program. Regarding the nurse aid certification examination mentioned earlier, I would be in favor of the recommendation of a computerized written exam and revised skill exam. Would the board consider allowing a designated program instructor to facilitate the skills exam to reduce the bottleneck associated with the scheduling of the exam and expedite the pathway to final certification? I am in favor of, at a minimum, extending the temporary CNA certifications. Roberta or Elena, I don't know if you have any questions or comments regarding the question from Corey Dennis.
Well, I think that is a testing question, and Pearson Vue has to maintain the quality and the validity of the test. So they have psychometricians that look at how they modify the skills, and so I think they hire their own observers for that. So
okay, thank you. I see a hand raised. I thought it might have gone down. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. Otherwise, I'll continue on with the written comments. Looks like the hand has gone down. So, all right.
I'm sorry, Laura. I see Miss Diane Powell with her hand raised. Do you?
Oh, was it? Okay, let me see if I can see her. Oh, there it is. Thank you. I did miss that. Thank you. Oh, Diane Powell. It says you're self-muted. There we go. Diane?
Yes.
There you go. You can speak.
Yes. My question is, well, first there's a statement, the question, recommendation. I know that the state has a contract with Pearson Vue. I know many states have turned away. In fact, there's only 11 states now that still use Pearson Vue. Well, because of several issues. But in Kansas, I own Allied Health, and we have campuses in Texas, Kansas, and Colorado, and we're opening in Missouri. And I can tell you that in Kansas, it is the instructor that does the skills competency and signs an affidavit on it. Generally, it's not the same instructor that taught the class. It's another one from the school that comes in and does, so there's no, bias perhaps from teaching the student, but that is how we do it. And we have Criterion, Kryterion, as our testing company. And it is a fraction of the price, and it's much easier to work with. And so I know it is a federal guideline, but there are ways that many states now have gone around it. And so that is a comment I had. I am in support of making these at least somewhat temporary, at least for the 15 months, and certainly for CNA, because it is going to be quite a long while since they do not have immunity from, legal, and we want to keep our seniors safe. I don't see an end to being blocked from going into a clinical site, which I think is probably a good idea anyway. But so I would recommend that. And I think my question would be, is there an ability to do some in-house hands-on as well as some virtual, but just not out in the nursing homes? But can we mix it up some? Thank you.
Okay. I think Elena is working to capture your comments right now in the draft on the screen. Elena, do you have any follow-up questions for Ms. Powell?
No, I don't. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you, Diane Powell. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again. We have about a few minutes left here, right, Elena? Or how does that work?
Yes, so it is almost 4 o'clock. The webinar is going to end shortly. So if we could just if anybody else does want to speak, go ahead and provide the written comments, or you could raise your hand and we can take your, or we can unmute your line. Otherwise, we are encouraging people to send written comments to the email address that I've provided several times. If you need it again, let me know. But this is just a long collaborative process. We want to hear from the stakeholders, and then when the board next meets in July, they'll provide feedback on the feedback that we're receiving from now until then. And so it's just going to take time to get this right and make sure that we are including the perspectives of everyone, and everything is being taken under consideration. So we'll take a couple more comments, but if we don't get to you today, please submit them to that email address.
Okay, thank you, Elena, for clarifying that. I will say there are quite a few written comments we received via this webinar that we haven't read out loud. Your comments will still be submitted to the board and your questions for their consideration, so have no fear. But we just wanted to let you know that. So I'm going to go ahead and look for any raised hands. So again, raise your hand if you want to go ahead and get your voice on the record. Please feel free to do that. I'm going to scroll down really quickly. Otherwise, I will take some more written comments and read those out. I see one with Zoe Joanna Hill. Zoe Joanna Hill, you're unmuted.
Hi, thank you very much. So I'm Joanna Hill from Denver College of Nursing. I had written in this comment, but I wasn't sure you were seeing it. So thank you for reiterating that you can access my comments. So I just wanted to add my support for the comments made by Colleen, Kasper, Ingrid Johnson, and Tammy Spencer about the caution and supporting the need to extend the time frame to a year to fully evaluate the ramifications of these rules relative to nursing education and patient safety. Thank you very much.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, let me see if there's any other hands raised here at the last minute. Again, in the meanwhile, Elena, do you want to go ahead and repeat that email address so that people can send questions, comments over the next several weeks if they have those, while I look for more hands raised?
Yes, the email address is Dora_DPO_rulemaking@state.co.us. And it's actually on the notice that was sent out for this meeting today. If you look on the second page, you'll see the email address there as well.
Okay, great. Let me see if I can find a couple comments from people who we have not heard from yet. Let's see. I do see quite a few questions regarding the data, and so I did send a chat with the information for contacting our public information officer for those organizations or folks that are interested in obtaining data regarding temporary licenses. Please let us know. If you did not see that chat or have problems with that, you can go ahead and email the rulemaking email address that Elena just sent out, and we can get you in contact with the right person if needed. But I did send it out via chat. Hopefully everyone saw that. Deborah Pollard, in the meanwhile, submitted a written comment saying, I support the recommendations to extend the suspension of rules for Part F, I believe, until September 21, 2021 to evaluate data and outcomes. Deborah Pollard is the Deputy Chair of Nursing at UCCS. Let's see if I can find anybody else. Laura Armstrong, who has left, stated, I was a clinical adjunct for an LPN program. Students were able to learn from me as well as nurse preceptors. Also, post-clinical conferences also included other on-site personnel such as social workers, physical therapy, and the registered dietitian. Unfortunately, SIMs do not bring in the holistic care in the LTC setting. I hope that emergency education rules do not become permanent. Thanks. So thank you, Laura Armstrong, for your comment there. Let's see, I'll take one more and then I'll let Elena wrap up. Let's see if I can find one. There's quite a few people echoing. Let's see. Corey Dennis states, I would be in support of reducing the clinical hours required for CNA in substitution for simulation, but I think there must be a minimum rotation in a clinical facility. So thank you for that, Corey Dennis. And with that, I'll let Elena go ahead and wrap up, I believe. Correct?
Okay, yes, I am ready. A lot of this information is what we've already talked about, but I do want to thank everybody for attending. I know we've lost a lot of people since the beginning of this meeting, but thanks for participating in our stakeholder meeting today. Your comments and your program recommendations will be presented to the board before the formal rulemaking process starts. Once again, the board is going to meet on, as Roberta mentioned earlier, it sounds like July 22nd. And if you want to come to that board meeting, which will be virtual, go to the board's website and you can register for that webinar and you can hear the board's take on all these rules. They'll also be provided the stakeholder comments from today and all written comments, and they'll be able to talk about whether they're in support or non-support for the same changes that the public is. So that's one way to participate. But the permanent rulemaking hearing is tentatively scheduled for August 19th. So definitely look out for the notice that will be sent on that. And this concludes our stakeholder meeting. Thank you. I'm going to end the webinar now.